With the next high-profile Nintendo Switch release being Miitopia, a HD remake of a Swan song from the 3DS era, I've been reflecting on the 3DS library as a whole, and how the Nintendo Switch's continued sales momentum could be easy justification for Nintendo to do exactly with that library what they did with the Wii U. Port every single noteworthy game from that platform to this one. With this being the case, and in this perfect world, I have come to the conclusion that Kid Icarus Uprising should be the next game to make its way from 3DS to Nintendo Switch. Let's talk about it. Masahiro Sakurai commemorated the 9-year anniversary of the original release of Kid Icarus Uprising in a tweet. In this post, he mentioned how he receives a lot of requests for a sequel for this game, but creating one would be difficult. I think that is a conversation for another day, but something that could be simple would be to rework the original Kid Icarus Uprising to function as a Nintendo Switch game instead. Despite its flaw, the most memorable title on Nintendo 3DS for me was easily Kid Icarus Uprising. It was and continues to be the result of what I contend is a dream formula for any new game release as a Nintendo fan. Sora Limited took a dormant Nintendo franchise that, prior to Uprising's release, wasn't revised for over 2 decades, reimagined what the game's gameplay should be in a franchise this old to simultaneously remain true to its roots and to be fit for a modern game release, expanded the franchise's world and characters to facilitate that evolution, and went the extra mile to even create a deceptively deep competitive online experience as the cherry on top of all of that. However, for everything that Kid Icarus Uprising does right, the fatal flaw that weighs it down in the end is its control schemes. And it's such a hindrance to this game that I couldn't easily recommend playing it to any and everyone I know with the 3DS. And to be real, that couldn't be helped. The game is limited given the 3DS's form factor. Nintendo was aware of this. They tried to rectify it with the option to remap the face buttons to control the reticle in the base game, the clumsily done right stick accessory for the original 3DS hardware, or even the new 3DS or 2DS C-stick knobs. None of these patchwork solutions felt like a true answer to the one glaring problem with Kid Icarus Uprising though. This is the main reason why I think Kid Icarus Uprising is a prime candidate for a Nintendo Switch remake, and also the main reason why they don't really need the original team to make the game happen if they don't want to. Being able to play this game completely unchanged with a Nintendo Switch Pro controller or even a set of Joy-Con would improve it astronomically in my opinion. And the control scheme at that point is self-explanatory, and they could even do what is now a crowd favorite and implement support for Splatoon style controls with the option to use motion to complement the right stick for aiming. I'd happily pay $50 or even $60 just for that with a modest visual boost or a boost to 60 frames per second. Miitopia's promise is a bit higher than that bare minimum though for this price, so as a thought experiment, what truly would be the Miitopia for Nintendo Switch equivalent in regards to upgrades for Kid Icarus Uprisings? Well, first and foremost, if we're going to see additional development resources allocated to this remake slash remaster or whatever, I'd like to see Nintendo further flesh out the campaign of this game in a few key ways. What if there were additional chapters that allowed the player to take control of memorable characters like Magnus, Viridi, Palutena, or even characters on the other side of the aisle like Hades or Medusa, in a similar way to the Olimar side story in Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Despite the fact that I tend to personally be gameplay first with what resonates with me most in a given game, Kid Icarus Uprising in particular shines brightest with its characters and their interactions, so much so that the Smash series has made that a part of its homage to the Kid Icarus franchise by way of the Goddess Guidance sequences, something that in and of itself has been embraced by the community to the point that they continue to create their own iterations of these after Nintendo made the decision to call it quits on creating official versions for DLC fighters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And for good reason. The personalities of all of these characters were fun to see, and their dynamic when engaging with one another was a big part of the appeal of the original Kid Icarus Uprising game, and marketing material for the game as well. Doubling down on that by injecting more of all of the characters in this world in a release like this would make all of the sense in the world, both for more of that fun writing, but also for the potential for added depth in the gameplay by way of the different play styles that would be needed for all of these vastly different characters. If I'm being honest, the best possibility this presents would be to add a co-op story mode of some sort, with Pit alongside a rotating cast of these characters. Pikmin 3 did it, Captain Toad did it, why can't this game do it as well? Or, if they don't want to go that far, what if they retooled the difficulty to be even more challenging than the Risk It All 9.9 wagers on each level in the original game, now that fighting the controls would be a thing of the past on Switch, therefore making the game inherently easier. This thought in particular came to me when thinking about how the DNA of Sakurai's games and franchises tend to have a few through lines, and although Kirby Epic Yarn isn't a game that he had direct involvement in, its application of game development principles that Sakurai became known for in the days that he created Kirby have continued to influence his creations even after he's left them, all the way up until as recent as the 3DS remake of its own could be a perfect fit for this game as well. The devilish mode in that game would be fantastic in Kid Icarus Uprising with some tweaks to make it fit in the universe. They wouldn't even have to rename it if they didn't want to, given the theming of the Kid Icarus mythos. It'd just almost be too perfect of a way to add even more optional difficulty to a game that could very well feel old hat to people that played the original. All of that said, the single player is good enough to stand on its own with the standard affair that I mentioned at the top of the video, and expanding it beyond that could be a greater challenge than they're willing to tackle with a project like this, especially if the original team isn't going to be on board for it, given Sakurai's focus on Smash Ultimate, or even his desire to take a break when his work on that title is done. That said, there is an easy way to have him in a relatively hands-off advisory role and just keep the major Switch-specific additional content-based improvements to the multiplayer mode. For those of you that haven't played it, the original Kid Icarus Uprising's Together mode allowed for up to 6 players to play a team-based mode called Light vs. Dark, or a free-for-all mode, and both were playable through online play or through the 3DS's local wireless connectivity. It's the closest thing I think we'd ever get to a Smash Bros. Game being designed well for a 3D space, and it's also one of the examples outside of Splatoon of Nintendo doing a team-based shooter to great success. And honestly, even though, like the campaign, it could stand on its own and be worth the MSRP of a Switch game with the boost to 1080p and all the other standard Switch port stuff like 60 frames per second and yada yada yada, if they really want this game to resonate, I also think that the multiplayer is the perfect opportunity to expand on what the original game had to offer in an organic way that isn't basically making a sequel in all but name. All they'd really have to do is add stuff like new weapons, items, powers, an additional game type or two, more arenas, that sort of deal. And the design of these theoretical game types wouldn't have to be anything crazy. I'd personally like them to just increase the amount of players per match for free-for-all and Light vs. Dark mode, or add a wingman mode where instead of having 2 teams of 3, it's teams of 2 with a different objective of some sort. I'd also like to see character customization on some level and make cosmetic items an incentive to play the multiplayer mode by making them unlockable through playing that. You know, typical shooter stuff. I think bringing this game to Switch in this way would of course be great as a fan of the original who doesn't want to dig up my 3DS to play it again, but also as a fan of Nintendo IP that would like to see more of them be used more often. If this game gets remade in a way that doesn't have the unfortunate nerf of being tied to a limited control layout, it could very well find a massive audience in the same way games like Splatoon have. I truly believe that, and if that happens, it could be yet another game added to the rotation of Nintendo franchises that get new releases on a semi-regular, if not just straight up regular basis. That's a win-win for everyone as far as I can see it. But those are just my thoughts on why Kid Icarus Uprising could be a perfect Nintendo Switch 3DS remake. What do you think about this idea? What do you think about the original Kid Icarus Uprising? And what do you think about remaking 3DS games on Switch to begin with? Let me know all of that and more in the comments down below. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate it if you clicked the like button and shared this video with a friend that also likes Nintendo games, would like to see more 3DS games ported to the Switch, or just thinks Kid Icarus Uprising looks like an interesting game. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, once Parker gets adjusted to being a dad, everybody go to @ParkerDeal on Twitter and congratulate him if you haven't already, by the way. I'll be streaming in the meantime on the days that we can't do the podcast or extra videos, so go to our Twitch at twitch.tv/fanatixfour. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.